today is your day worth celebrating. Is it worth bringing that up on air?
20 months today?
20 months since my last drink.
Today.
Tomorrow would be
Like
the first day sober.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, that's significant.
Yeah.
I was in a room where I heard a guy talking about he had 10 years without a drink.
Wow.
And then another guy said he had 5 or 6 years. I don't remember, something similar.
Mm-hmm.
And then a guy stood up and said, I hadn't had a drink in 3 days. And there was a new guy sitting there shaking, literally, about to go into DTs. And his response, he hadn't responded to the other guys. But that guy said he had 3 days. This guy that's detoxing says, how the hell did you do that?
Yeah.
Right?
Puts it in
Yep.
perspective.
Yep.
And that's why I
remember
say
those
20
first 3
months
days.
is significant, because that's
The hard
part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Really hard. You learn to live a life of recovery, but it's practice over and over, day in and day out,
Mm-hmm.
taking it a day at a time and doing the right things.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us, when we were in our cups, didn't have a really good idea what the right things were.
Right.
Or chose to ignore them.
I like that line, when we were in our cups.
Yeah.
Chose to ignore them is, I believe, a lot of people. I think a lot of people know they have a problem, and they choose to ignore it or choose to feed the problem instead
Oh,
of
yeah.
the solution.
Yeah, I had every self-help book known to man.
Mm-hmm.
And this was before I got my first DWI. So I knew I had a problem before the law got involved.
Mm-hmm.
But I got a DWI. They put me through all this counseling and whatnot. I continued to drink anyway.
Yeah. Same.
My alcoholism really never got my attention until I lost my family.
Mm.
And that was important to me, so I sought help then.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
I was going to say, that's your first set of family.
That was my first family. And thank God, literally thank God, my oldest daughter from my first wife, Jamie's sister, older sister, she and I have a great relationship today. She's in recovery.
That's great.
She's got 26 years
Wow.
now. She's
Almost 27, because we just celebrated his 26th birthday, so that's how we know.
Yeah,
She's almost at
that's right.
27.
Well, 27 would be, that's right. It'd
February?
Be, no, January, I
January.
think. Yeah. And and when we have gatherings, she's married to her husband is in recovery. So we have a lot of recovering folks at celebrations. Very little, if any, booze.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally around a holiday, somebody will bring a beer or two, but there's never the drunk uncle that's causing problems at our house.
That would have been me.
Yeah, well, that
Sometimes.
was me.
Not all the time.
That was my older brother and his family. I was the butt of the jokes for my, because when I'd always show up drunk at holidays and other events. So
Well, before we get too far into there, let's start into what molded and shaped Jim Walker into the man he is today. Where did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
here in Austin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my dad became the actuary for the State Board of Insurance in Texas. He was offered that job. And so we moved from Kentucky, Louisville, where he worked at Lincoln Income Life, and apparently had a really good reputation. He was a math genius, played the piano without ever reading a note, and was amazing on a piano.
Wow.
So they recruited him to Texas to be the actuary, and that moved us to Austin in '54. I was 6 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Born in Kentucky then. Born in Kentucky.
Born in Louisville.
All
Yeah.
right.
Myself and Muhammad Ali, you know. But
So what was it like growing up in Austin in the 60s?
Great town.
Yeah.
Such a good town then. Everybody, treated everybody with respect, waved at everybody, whether you actually knew them or not. And it was a large town, not really a city yet, in terms of the culture. Great food. My dad came home and announced to my mother that we were moving to Austin, Texas. She said, "What are you talking about, Austin, Texas?" And he said, "Yeah, I got a great job down there." And when they were recruiting me, they took me out to Lake Travis, fed me the best barbecue I've ever eaten in my life and the coldest beer I've ever had in my life. So we're moving.
Sold.
So it turns out my dad was alcoholic, but that's another story. So, so I went to Travis Heights Elementary School, Fillmore Junior High, and Travis High School. There were 3 high schools when I went to high school. Reagan the Fourth came into being in 1965. So my senior year, there was a 4th high school. That's how small Austin was.
What kind of trouble did you get into in high school?
Oh, gosh.
I didn't get in any trouble with the law. I had some problems at school. I got in trouble a couple of times for setting up fights between guys. There were guys that everybody wanted to see.
You were a manager in an early age.
That's correct.
That's the Muhammad Ali link, I guess.
But I got the same punishment as the guys who actually fought when we got caught. So.
Well, I think it's worth noting you brought your father up the fact that he wasn't around when you were in high school.
Yeah, he had passed away.
Right.
Yeah, he died. I was 13 when he passed away of a heart attack. He had a heart valve that was damaged due to polio when he was 16. So he had his first heart attack killed him. He was 45 years old, and I remember laying in his casket. He had black hair, red skin, almost like an Indian, and not a gray hair in his head at age 45. And fortunately, we got those genes. Jamie doesn't look anywhere near her age. My daughter doesn't look anywhere near her older daughter.
Any Scandinavian?
None of us do. Adam doesn't.
No.
People think I'm 10, 15 years younger than I actually am. I get that a lot.
Yeah, well, you don't. You're my father's age. You don't look quite as old as he does.
Yeah, so it's my dad gave us that, I guess.
And the gene. The gene.
Yeah, the gene.
The alcohol gene.
Yeah, the alcoholism too, and it does run in families.
Yeah. And
there's been a lot of research on that with twin studies and such in Europe, where they determine that sure, environmental has an impact, but it's not as significant as DNA. As relates to passing addiction on from one generation to the next. But anyway, so I went to Travis High School and went to college at Glenn in Brenham, Texas. Graduated there with an education degree. I thought I wanted to coach. And then I went back to what was called Southwest Texas State University.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
7,000 students when I went there.
Wow. It's like 50,000 now.
Yeah.
I think. Wow.
Yeah. And I lasted 2 semesters. I dropped out because I got married. I found out after I married my first wife that she had like $6,000 in credit card and other debt that I wasn't aware of. So I dropped out of college and went back to work for the civil engineering firm that I had worked at in high school and college in the summers. That's how I'd pay my way through college every year. I'd work and save all the money I made on the drilling crew. And so I went back to work for them and dropped out of college. Never went back after that. And from there, over time, I got recruited into the radio advertising business.
Oh, yeah. You got a voice for radio.
Yeah, a friend of mine from high school was the sales manager of the first FM rock station in Austin, KRMH, Good Karma.
Good karma.
103.7 on your dial. And anyway, Terry recruited me to come to work there as to sell advertising, and I loved it. It was fun. So I did that, and then he moved over to KVET Radio, was recruited over there to be their sales manager, and I followed him over there, and I worked at KVET a couple of years, and my drinking really got bad when I was
Yeah.
at
That's
KVET.
radio.
That's a party industry too,
it's-
just like the
it's
just like the
something
hospitality industry.
Yeah.
I ironically, 2007, when I graduated college in 06, I came back and I, of course, got a job at the first place that would give me health insurance and full benefits day one. So that was selling computers at Dell. And after about 8 months, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I want to be with people and in real sales. So ironically, Dad introduced me to an old friend of his, and then I went into the radio business as well, doing ad sales, and not much has changed since whatever years he was there. I mean, at 4:00 every Friday, they roll the beer cart out, and you don't want to know, all your clients are bar owners and club owners and all of that, and not much has changed. Yeah.
And the series Mad Men, it's so popular.
Right.
That setting was the 60s. Same thing when I worked in advertising in the 70s. All that was real. That stuff was all going on. And weren't you at Gerset Spence for a while too, or GSD&M?
GSD.
I did go. I actually had a teacher terrify me into believing that if I didn't have so many internships by the time I graduated, there's no way anybody would hire me for a job. And luckily, we were blessed to know some of the owners of GSD&M. So I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, I'm home for 3 weeks over Christmas break. Make me an internship. I know y'all don't technically have a program, but I need one." And she said, "Okay." And shockingly, they even paid me. But same thing. Yeah, I mean,
It's amazing what you can do if you just ask.
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I
People don't
actually
know.
have a rule in my life that if I ask for something I want or ask someone for something and they say no, then I'm clearly talking to the wrong person. And then I find the right person.
Right.
There's some people who just take no for an answer, and I'm typically not that person.
There's always somebody up the ladder somewhere that'll say yes.
That's right.
Talk
So
to them.
luckily, we joke that who I reached out to, she's the ampersand in GSD&M because she's not technically GSD or M, but she was pretty high up there. So she was lovely enough to give me an internship there. Yep. And same thing. Always a good time. Even though those 3 weeks were a good time. So
Is that when your drinking career really took off?
In the advertising radio business, yeah, for sure, absolutely. Roy Spence of GSD&M, Longhorn legend, great guy, super
great
guy.
Yeah.
He never will. At the time, he had a ponytail down to his belt when they opened their agency, and he lived at the office because he couldn't afford an office and an apartment.
Wow.
They were just getting started, but the creative stuff that was coming out of there from early days was amazing. Really
Remember,
good
don't
stuff.
mess with Texas.
Yeah, I was about to say, didn't they do the
Yeah,
Don't
Yes.
Mess
when
with
we
Texas?
actually
Yes.
cared about,
Yeah.
not throwing trash on
Yeah.
the streets. Yeah.
And the person in charge of media buying was Judy, and another awesome person. They were all great. They brought in Tim McClure, who is the guy that came up with the whales on the 737s for Southwest
Southwest,
Airlines
yeah.
I remember that
that
too.
conjoined two
Yeah.
clients in that campaign.
Nice.
Fun stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, my drinking got worse and worse and worse, and it got to the point where my first wife left with my daughter Jennifer. We were talking about, and told our friends, "Do not tell him where we are." She was at her brother's, hiding, if you will.
Right.
And so, excuse me, I called the father of a friend of mine who I knew was in recovery from alcoholism, Kathy, Linda's friend, Kathy's dad.
And how old were you at this point?
27.
27. Okay.
And so I called him and told him, I said, "I got a problem. I don't know what to do with it. I've I've quit 1,000,000 times. And he said, yeah, we all have, was his response.
Every Monday morning for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't stay quit. I haven't been able to. So he invited me over to his house, and I went over and we talked for a couple of hours. And he said, there's 12-step groups you can try, and you can do this, you can do that. He told me about a detox that I might need because I drank every day at that point. And I didn't go to detox, and I, thank God, didn't suffer physically too bad. I got sick, but not to the point of being in danger.
Right.
People shouldn't do that. They
Right.
should get medically
I found that out,
detoxed.
too.
So I want to be clear about that. But so yeah, I find a group of people that are all dealing with the same issues, and they help me so much. I talk about them, think about them every day to this day, and that was 1975.
I was 3 years old. Wow.
And I got more and more involved in the area of alcohol, drug abuse treatment and services as I realized, continued to work in advertising, but I realized there weren't enough services out there. People, Austin didn't have much. The state hospital was here, which was scary.
Yeah.
But they did have an alcohol unit.
The Shoal Creek one was there? Was the one on Shoal Creek already
Shoal,
open?
Shoal Creek Hospital ultimately recruited me in
Oh, really?
1980.
Okay.
But in the late 70s, I was on a number of civil boards. I became the president of the Greater Austin Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse, and got more and more involved in trying to stimulate the creation of more services. Shoal Creek started a program in probably 79 called the Renaissance Program. I may not have that date exactly right. It was in that area, though, called Renaissance. And it was a 28-day alcohol drug model that a doctor who's since passed away, one of my mentors, Dr. Stuart Niemer, was in charge of. And he brought in a clinical psychologist to oversee the programming. And Dr. Niemer was a psychiatrist, but he knew to use the disease model to help people because that's what was working at a place called Hazleton in Minnesota. They were getting good results with what was called became to be known as the Minnesota model, which was really focusing on alcoholism as a disease and not a moral issue, and not treating the symptoms of addiction to get to a point of harm reduction or even cure, which nobody's found yet.
Yeah.
But rather treat the disease of addiction. Go after it first. And that entails coming to the realization that no human power can relieve our alcoholism. And so treatment is a step toward, if you already have a God, great, you need to have a relationship with that God. If you don't have a God or a higher power, treatment supports and enables the patient to work toward discovering that God. So you seek God,
Right.
you find recovery.
And one thing
I have
that-
never sought God before.
One thing that you and I talked about before was trying to convince people to go to a treatment program who don't believe in God, who don't have that belief. And
That's 50% of people who go to treatment.
yeah. And so how does that work for them? Do you see that working? Do you see them responding negatively to it, or like pulling back, keeping those
In the
walls up?
beginning, absolutely. In the beginning, we see a lot of it, and we know the staff at my facility, the Arbor, we know how to handle that. We see it so frequently, and it's not about shaming or pushing or demanding anything. It's really about just asking them to stay open-minded, keep going to groups, keep learning more about your disease. And as long as you stay open-minded, maybe you'll be able to find a power outside yourself that can help you overcome this disease, because no human power has been able to treat this disease successfully. It doesn't exist.
No, I tried it on my own for 3 decades.
Yeah.
I gave up.
Yeah.
It was give up and give it to God, or give up and go home to God. So
Well, and I think
Let me
that's
share.
important.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that's important. What you were saying about you can believe in God, but that's that next step where you actually have to give it up to Him, right? So it's like
have a relationship.
and have the relationship, right? Like I know plenty of people who I grew up with that are either now they're through treatment and sober and working a program of some sort, who always went to church with us. They knew God, but they didn't really give up the power.
Right.
And until they did, they never really got help, or the help they needed, or sober or clean or whatever it was they're dealing with.
Right.
So there just needs to be that understanding. It's like just believing that God exists really isn't enough, right? Like
Right.
you have to be willing to give up that power to have any help, really.
yeah, giving up the control was the one for me. Like
I
giving
went
up the
to a
fact that I had no
therapist.
control.
Did you go to a therapist?
I did in 2008, 2009, when I was going through my divorce from my first wife, going through some therapy for past trauma, childhood trauma stuff that led to the depression, that led to the addictions and all that stuff. This time I did not.
Okay.
I kind of got to the point where I knew I knew everything that was wrong with me, and I chose not to address it, not to give it up to God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, instead of going to the Bible or going to God for answers or for guidance on where to look, I would just go drink.
Yeah.
Just bury it, keep
Yeah.
it buried, and don't have to worry about it. Don't have to
Yeah.
deal with it. And, so this time I did a lot of self-help, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, I watched a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of books. I listened to a lot of sermons. You know, I sought out the therapy on my own kind of thing because I wasn't ready to go public with it.
Yeah.
As a business owner, I didn't want to scare off any clients, kind of thing.
Right.
By being as vocal as I am about it now. But then I got to the point. The first 3 months are hard. You know, you gotta. There's a breaking point, and Atomic Habits was a really good one for me. And you've read Atomic Habits, James Clear. It's about retraining your brain. You know, the neuroplasticity in your brain, and getting into a workout program at the 3rd month that I stuck to every day, and then kind of over time everything just kind of clicked.
Yeah.
To where it's like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, yeah, there's life.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, that's how it's supposed to work. And so that's after I got to the point where I could comfortably talk about it. I thought, well, I can't be quiet about it because if I'm quiet about it, somebody else is going to go through the same thing I'm going through, except they're not going to ask for help and they're going to kill themselves.
Yeah.
And so, once I realized that I shouldn't stay quiet about it anymore is when I started talking about it.
I went through that too in the first 4 years where why aren't there any services here in Austin for people like me?
And more for men, you know,
Because
trying to reach
we're
men,
everywhere,
really.
you know. The need is obvious. And yet there wasn't much there at all. The Renaissance program at Shoal Creek Hospital in 1975 was $11,000.
Wow.
Without insurance?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And
Well, and insurance covering treatment is only in the last.
well, they did. There were some insurance programs back then that would cover it, but not very many.
And not really
Not
the
like-
full extent of what they needed to
Correct.
cover. Right.
Yeah.
Still have some of that issue today. But,
Right.
But all the carriers now are required to carry some form of mental health coverage.
Right.
They have to offer it.
Well,
So-
you were talking about therapy?
So
You had a
yeah,
therapist?
I was gonna tell you my therapy story. So I get my second DWI. This time I was married. I was 22 years old, and was looking at jail time. And the judge, for some reason, gave me an extended probation. They did like 10 months probation. and I didn't do any more jail time than I had served when they arrested me. And, excuse me, so they had a program called Adult Probation Services at Travis County. And it was for people who got DWIs. They required you, if you wanted to be on probation, you had to agree to go to this program, which I did. And the counselor there recommended I go seek an individual therapist to work through some of my childhood stuff. And so I met with him one time, and he told me at the end of the session, what you really need to do instead of going out drinking is tonight I want you to go home and have a martini with your wife, and y'all talk about these things. And so I did. I'd never bought gin before in my life. I bought a fifth of gin.
Gin's the worst.
And vermouth. It was horrible. And took it home, and we had a martini, and then I had another one, and I had another one, and I had another one, and I left, and I was gone for 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. That's one way to do it.
So I didn't go back to that therapist.
Yeah.
It's probably a good thing. Yeah.
Now, in his defense, I don't remember, it was a long time ago, but I'm certain I manipulated him to the point where I could get that kind of response from him.
Yep.
Make my
You
drinking
didn't have
okay.
a problem. Yeah, that's right.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you didn't grow up knowing him as a drinker.
Well, no, not completely. So if we fast forward from his first wife and my sister, he did, when you met Mom, you were sober.
Right.
For
6 months.
Yeah, right when you're supposed to meet your next spouse at 6 months.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
Right.
So he went on from there, and you made recovery your business, right?
Yep.
I mean, I grew up, I was born here, and within 6 months we moved to Kerrville, the booming town of Kerrville, because Dad was running La Hacienda Treatment Center, which is a pretty well-known one out there. Beautiful. I mean, I remember, gosh, those people, I'm sure there's still people that have me on a list and want to kill me because I was, we'd be 3, 4, 5, and he stayed going back and forth all the way up till I was, I think, 7 or 8, but we thought it was a resort. We'd show up out there and be like, we're swimming in the pool. We're going to play pool in the pool table. And now I remember thinking, like, all these adults hate us. Why do they hate us? And they were just so irritated because they're going through treatment.
Right.
Like, this is,
Right.
especially if it's their first week or two, hell for these people.
Right.
And here are some annoying little kids just running around
having
like
fun.
like it's a resort.
It's a vacation.
Yeah. Every now and then
her and her brother.
and I do every now and then ask him, I'm like, you know what? 90 days by the river in Georgetown kind of sounds nice. How do I sign up for
Right.
this?
Yeah.
But for the most part, be either running a center like La Hacienda, or we got to a point where he took a job in Pennsylvania and we made it 11 months. And my mom was like, nope, I don't care. You can travel. You can fly back and forth every week. I'm not built for snow and cold. We had a 40-pound wiener dog, and her belly would drag the snow.
Oh, my.
So between her and my mom, we were not staying in Pennsylvania. So we moved back. We were one of the first, I think, 100 houses in Circle C in 1989, and I truly grew up here. But I do remember he did have some relapses.
Yeah.
And you think, I mean, you're the guy who runs all the places, right? You've been clean and sober for, I think the one I'm thinking of when I was 11, that would have been
90.
It was 96.
96, yeah. Yeah.
You had been sober for how long and relapsed?
Okay. So I relapsed in 96 and found recovery again 15 months later in 97.
But prior to that, how long had you been
19 years without a drink or drug.
Wow.
19 years.
What caused the relapse?
And I quit going to meetings. Quit going to meetings and being around my people for about a year. And
Traveling a lot for work.
doing a lot of travel. It was very lonely work. I had a region of hospitals that I was responsible for, and I'd travel to where the problems were to help them fix it,
Mm-hmm.
and get to the hotel room at
Right.
night, and everybody else had gone out to eat together and drink. Because a lot of these folks weren't in recovery. Most of them weren't.
Right. They're just in the business. of
Yeah, they're
recovery.
just in the healthcare business, and so it was lonely. I'd call home and I'd hear about what Jamie had done that day and what Adam had done that. It'd just make me feel even worse. But yeah, it was kind of a lonely existence, and I wasn't getting the support
And there was no
that I knew
accountability.
I needed. And the other thing that happened is, because we were in Kerrville those years, most of the people that worked for me at La Hacienda were in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd see them at different recovery events and whatnot. And I got to where I wouldn't share my personal stuff, because there was always staff around.
Mm. You didn't have to
And
anymore.
that's not good. That wasn't good either. And it's a common phenomena. There's a fellow that Wayne Kritzberg who wrote a book about it called the two hat dilemma. And the two hats are recovery and treating people to find recovery. And you get to a point where you think your work is your program, or covers your program, if you will. And it doesn't. It doesn't work that way. And I learned that the hard way. I went through 15 months of hell. After I was drinking for 90 days, I was ready to stop, and I couldn't.
That's kind of how it did happen for me. I quit in 2022. I'm sorry, 2021, in January of 2021, for 4 months. But I didn't do it for me. I did it to save my marriage,
Yeah.
basically. And I didn't want to go through another divorce, already
Right.
did that. Saw what that was like. And so I tried, and so I made it 4 months until we went to Lukenbach we went to Fredericksburg for a weekend anniversary trip. And I'd never been to Lukenbach, and she had never been to Lukenbach. It's like, I'm going to have a beer in Lukenbach.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
fine.
what you're supposed to do.
It's been 4 months. I'm okay. I don't need one.
Yeah.
I had a beer in Lukenbach, and then 2 more in Fredericksburg at lunch, and then probably 4 more that night. I probably had a 9 by the end of the day, and then repeated it all the next day.
And every day after.
And then I'm just going to drink on the weekends. I was like, I can do it. I just did it. I'll just drink on the weekends. And then next weekend came, and then the next weekend came. I was like, I can drink on a Wednesday. Let's go out to eat.
That's what alcoholics do.
And then I wanted to go out to eat 3 or 4 times a week, just so I could have drinks there and not at home, kind of thing.
It is.
Well, James, as a professional, I want you to know you have accurately diagnosed yourself.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so after
we're
about-
not doctors, but
after
we feel
2
pretty
years almost of that, 16 months almost of that,
Yeah.
a little more.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's
it was
hell.
hell. It was hell.
I was so
you're,
sick.
You're trying to manage the addiction. You're trying to regulate it. You're trying to hide it. You're trying to live the 2-hat life. I was trying to live the life of the guy who worked at church, did video for the church for 8 years at that point, and more at church every Sunday. And I was going home and drinking at night every night.
Well, and
Jamie was playing softball
this is
when
my
I was in my relapse.
This is my
And I
my
went to
one
one of her
story.
games. It was like a Saturday morning. I had come in Friday night from the East Coast. I get off the plane. I'm always drunk when I get off the plane on Friday night. So the next day she has her game in the morning. I don't know what time. I don't remember anything about the game. All I remember is how sick I was.
And I can tell you that my side of this, because this is, as a kid who grew up, he was sober, and I don't think I ever really understood fully what he did for a job. Like I said, we would run around that place.
He worked at a resort.
Right, that's right. He worked at a resort with a
resort
lot of
manager.
angry people walking around. That's as far as I knew. And he ran hospitals. That's kind of how they explained it to me. But I vividly, and keep in mind, I was daddy's girl. We would go, again, he was sober, so he was the best dad ever. But I vividly remember my mom and I driving on I-35 on a Friday night to go pick him up from the airport. And it was literally, I think, my mom she had the biggest cell phone. It was like the Zach Morris phone, because that was the first cell phone.
Yeah.
And he had
With the antenna
That's
on.
right. We had to pull the antenna
Yep.
up. And she even, because she was driving, told me, the phone's ringing, answer it. And so I answered her cell phone, and it was him calling from a payphone. He said, let me talk to your mom. There was no like, hi, I love you. How you doing? He said, let me talk to your mom. I was like, okay. So I hand mom the phone, and apparently he let her know, or she knew, whether he was honest with her, I don't know. But all I know is that she just kind of, said a word under her breath, and we exited and you'd back around to head home. And I said, Mom, what are you doing? And she said, Dad's been traveling and he doesn't feel very well and he doesn't want to get you sick before your games tomorrow. So he's just going to stay in the hotel that's by the airport and then he'll meet us at your game tomorrow. And I was like, okay. And I remember stepping out of the dugout that morning and watching him get out of a cab wearing, like, it's like the most cliche, sorry, but it was thing, like, and Friday's work clothes and looking just disheveled and sick with his
Horrible.
suitcase and his briefcase and walking up to my Saturday morning softball game and just looking at him, and he gave me a big hug and everything. But I mean, that was the first time I think I really understood the difference between and I had friends whose parents drank and whatever else, but I just we never saw the aftermath. You only see the fun party dad while you're at dinner or while you're at an event or whatever else. And so that was my first experience of like what a hungover sick person really looks like. And luckily for us, it didn't last that long. And I think between busy lifestyles and other things going on in our life, they did a pretty good job of keeping it from me. That's the only real memory I have that like stands out of like, what the heck? That's never been my dad. My dad's always been the first one to drop me off at practice or at games or whatever else. So
and that's when you realized he wasn't perfect.
Well, that's right. And that's true. I mean, really, because up until then, that was my guy, and he still is. But it's like, yeah, you have those moments.
I never made amends to you for that.
Well,
sweetie,
here we are.
I'll try to make it up to you.
Okay,
I'll
perfect.
do better.
Perfect.
So my new sobriety date is March 1st of 97.
Okay,
so I have 27 years.
But how many combined?
And I don't miss meetings.
Gosh, almost 40.
And I don't miss my morning prayer. I don't miss my morning meditation. At night, I do a little review of the day. And it's not like life is smooth and doesn't have its issues and bumps and struggles. It absolutely does. Life still happens. But, with God having my back, it just is so much easier. I mean, it's just totally different than the life before. No comparison.
Well, and
I was so lost.
We speak about, in my business even, like there's no sense of being here without a purpose. And it's been really fun, honestly, as your daughter, to see like, specifically, I feel like in the last 20 years, but I know it's always kind of been there. He's come to the conclusion that his life's purpose is to save as many addicts as he can and help them. And
amen.
And a lot of people are like, well, your dad's place is fancy and maybe I can't afford that. It's not about that. He's not selling his, I mean, don't get me wrong, if it's his fit, he will, but he's more about sitting down with people where they're at, figuring out what their situation is and making sure he can help them in any way he can, whether it's with his treatment center through a different program. Everyone's kind of got different things, and he can speak more to that, than I can. But I will tell you my next favorite story is I was actually flying home with a group of friends from Cancun, not sober. But so we were hurting a little bit on the airplane. And, because we flew Southwest, and the night before was a lot of fun. Nobody checked in at 24 hours, so we were all C's. So we were spread out across the airplane in the middle seat. And I sat down next to a lady, and we just kind of start chatting. We're all flying back to Austin, so she's from Austin. And she explains to me, she starts talking about something, and I asked her what she does for a job, and she explained to me that there's now a sober high school in Austin.
Really?
For these kids, which is awesome because I can guarantee you, number one, if it did exist when I was in high school, to your point, no one was giving it up to God and admitting it and going there.
Right.
But, and so I said, oh, well, that's interesting. My dad works in the treatment world. And, and she's like, oh, what's his name? And I said, Jim Walker. I mean, you would have thought I told her that my dad was Jack Nicholson Or she literally goes,
President of the United States.
oh my gosh, he is the Godfather of Treatment in Texas. And I was like, cool. I don't think he's killed anyone, but other than that, but I mean,
she has other people that do that for her.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, the next 2 hours was about all the things that he's done. So it is really awesome as a child, right? To know that you have a parent that's out there. You know, I know the work my mom and I do is important, but and to an extent we are saving people's lives, but really, like, when strangers know him for what he's done, not to mention all the people in my life that he's helped.
Right.
You know, I mean, we grew up in a time, we've kind of talked about this, he worked in the industry and then he had to take a hiatus because in the 90s it wasn't cool to go to treatment. It was very hidden. It was very, like, if it did, you know, but I remember y'all brought up Shoal Creek as a kid. That was like a diss, right? Like, oh, you need to go to Shoal Creek.
Yep.
Like, that's what kids would say to people.
From the 90s
And
too.
it was like,
Yeah.
that was not cool if that had to happen. And he even had to step out of the industry for a while because there was no work, because people were just drinking and
They're having way too much fun.
well, either having too much fun or hiding all their problems, you know,
That
and
too.
just not addressing them. And then the amazing Lindsay Lohan and Britney Spears went to Promises in Malibu. And when the hottest pop stars on earth are admitting they have a problem and checking in, all of a sudden the business, am I right, kind of exploded again. I mean, where it was cool. Not cool.
Well,
it was,
the stigma was reduced.
the stigma
stigma
was
was
reduced significantly. And I think it's only got, to your point, now we have health insurance that's actually making a point to provide that. That wasn't really the case in 2001. You know, and it's, you could walk down the street and throw a rock and hit 5 people who have been to treatment, or at least they're willing to admit it. And so I do just think, you know, he's been a really big part of that, especially in this state, for sure, and helping grow it. And as soon as it kind of came back online with all of that, he was the first one there, you know, to try to revive it. And that's why he was sought out by the people he was sought out by to open the center that they have, because people know that he knows what he's doing. And so, you know, it's cool as a kid, for sure, to have your parent be that guy.
Helping people.
Yeah, helping people.
So
and a lot of my loved ones.
How did that come about? How did you get involved in the treatment center industry?
I was the president of the Greater Austin Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse, as I mentioned earlier, and one of our board members was the administrator of Shoal Creek Hospital. And Nancy Townsend, a wonderful woman, great mentor, taught me so much. But she recruited me. 1980. She recruited me to develop an employee assistance program that we could take to all the tech industries, companies that were coming into the area. Many of them were seeking employee assistance program services. Those services, as a service provider, what we did was take the program to the company, train their managers to observe and document inappropriate performance or unacceptable performance, document it, and then refer them to our counselor at the employee assistance program. So they got it wasn't anonymous, but their problems could be discussed at our office relatively safely, the employee would feel. And we would do a screening there. And the first thing we'd always screen for is addiction. Because 70%, the national statistic at that time was 70% of the people who go to employee assistance program counseling have an addiction issue. So we start there. And if they don't have an addiction, then we work to what other issues they might be, whether it be financial, marital, whatever. And then we get them to the appropriate resource. So we basically did a triage for these employees, because the companies understood they wanted to salvage good people. They didn't want to chase them up, because it costs money, for one thing, to train them.
Right.
And it costs money to recruit their replacement.
Well, and it
So
looks
it's
good
better
if you care
to
about
salvage.
your employees, too.
Yeah, sure. Well, the tech companies that were coming into Austin in the 70s and early 80s were looking for these services that didn't exist. The unions had them, There weren't many. There are very few unions in Texas, as you probably know.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the unions did have those services, but there wasn't a service like Nancy wanted to create. And so she asked me to do it out of the blue. I said, wow. I was working in an ad agency at the time. And
Early 30s?
She said, you're perfect because you're in recovery from alcoholism and you've been in the marketing advertising business. That's who I need and want to take this and sell it, if you will,
It's like chocolate
to
and
the
peanut
Austin
butter.
businesses.
It's like chocolate and peanut butter.
Yeah,
Go
exactly.
together, perfect.
So we had a lot of success over the next 4 years, and it continued on after I left. But we had enough success where my name, I guess, got out, and Republic Health Corporation recruited me to go run La Hacienda Treatment Center in 1984. That's when we moved to Kerrville.
Okay. And then the Arbor, when did that come about?
2009, I was approached by an individual who had a stepson who wanted to learn the alcohol drug treatment business because he had been through what I'd been through, and he wanted to go into that business. And this man wanted to help his stepson. So I'm at a fundraiser for PDAP, Palmer Drug Abuse Program. It's a program for kids with alcohol and drug issues. And I'm at this fundraiser. Well, he was at the fundraiser with his wife. And he comes over and taps me on the shoulder and said, hey, I want to talk to you about opening a treatment center. Introduced himself. And I said, I'd love to, but the guy that I'm consulting for right now is sitting at the table here. Can we talk at another time?
Yeah, not the best time
and he
to
said,
poach me.
sure. He said, yeah, sure, call me. So we got together. I had a business model that I had written a year and a half earlier. Let me tell you the whole story here of the Arbor. So I had worked in alcohol drug treatment all those years, probably 30 at that time. It's 45 now, so it's probably 30 years, and became disillusioned with the 28-day or 30-day model of treatment. 12% success rate. 12% of the people who were going to 30-day treatment were still sober at 1 year.
Wow.
And that was a national statistic that included all 30-day centers, for-profit, non-profit, took the whole gambit and came up with that average. And it didn't surprise me. Now, I knew La Hacienda was doing better than that. I just absolutely knew it from our alumni reunions. You could tell. So it was probably 25% maybe there.
Which is still double.
Yeah, it's much better. But generally speaking, I had been associated with and exposed to so many of these facilities that I was absolutely sure the 30-day model was not the way to go. That 90 days, which Betty Ford had started doing and put on their website in 2008, on their website was, the new gold standard for alcohol drug treatment is a 90-day residential experience.
It makes sense because
And
it took me
SAMHSA
about 3 months to feel normal.
Yeah.
So
Time is our friend. If we can keep somebody engaged in a treatment structure of some sort, even if they do 45 days in residence and then 45 days in an outpatient in a halfway house, you get them to 1 year, they have an 84% chance of long-term recovery.
Wow.
So
That's a big
I wrote a
difference.
business model for a treatment center that would keep people 90 days with an extended care piece to keep them in our structure for 1 year. That was our goal, get them to 1 year. And I had some investors, some of the high-tech companies that had come into town that I had worked doing their marketing and advertising. I went to those guys who were good friends by that point, and I said, I need investors. This is what I want to do. And they looked at my plan. They said, let's do it.
That's great.
So we found a ranch out in Burnett, beautiful place. Lake Buchanan was in the distance. You had a view of it. It's a really beautiful place up there outside of Burnett. And we got to the closing table to buy the ranch, and the people that owned it wouldn't budge, and they were about 22. Fred Klingensmith told me this. He was about 22 or 23% over market,
Mm.
and they wouldn't budge. And we were ready to move, but they wouldn't move. So my investor said, we put the Jim Walker factor in here that we really want to help you, but it's just not a good investment for us. I said, I understand. Plus, I was going to have to pay a lease that was exorbitant as a result of them not coming down some. So long and short, that deal fell through. But I still had the business model who I showed to this gentleman that tapped me on the shoulder at the PDAP fundraiser. And I took it to his house, showed it to him. He called me the next day. He said, I read your model. I love it. Let's do it. And we started looking for properties and found the ranch in Georgetown. Justin, his stepson, calls me, my business partner now. He calls me all excited. We found this place. Yeah. I said, Georgetown, I thought we were looking out west in the hill country. He said, this is great.
It's beautiful up there.
Yeah, so I went that day, went and looked at it with him. It was perfect.
Yeah, on the river, animals everywhere. Like I said, every now and then,
70 acres.
my sister and I joke. We're like, what if we check in together?
Yeah.
Like, we could use
Jenny,
90
Dad, I
days.
have a really bad
Jennifer's
drinking
always
problem.
asking
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
I have insurance.
Yeah. I mean, I could use a 90-day break every now and again, but, like I
So we
said.
opened in 2010.
Okay.
And that was the 90-day treatment center. But since then, y'all have...
A year later, we added sober living houses. We have 2 of those, one for men, one for women.
Is that
And then a
considered a
year
halfway
after-
house kind of?
Say that
Is
again?
that a halfway house kind of thing situation?
Yeah, that's the old term for it. We're not real crazy about that term because there's a connotation around significant
Like you're
mental
halfway
health.
there, right? Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So we call them sober living houses.
Okay.
And then extended care houses. A year later, we bought 2 of those. Or Justin's family bought them. We lease them from them, and they're over by campus. They're fabulous places, really nice. And we have 12 beds in each. So the way we use extended care, someone comes through for 90 days and they need more, we can put them in our extended care house and they attend outpatient programming 4 nights a week. The rest of the time they're going to 12-step meetings, meeting with a sponsor, but they're not working yet in extended care. After 2 to 3 months of extended care, then they're usually stepped down to sober living, where they begin to start their life again. They have meeting requirements, they have sponsor requirements, but they have their days to seek out employment, and they have to have a job after 2 weeks of being there.
Or they go back.
And we encourage recovery jobs. Do something simple and mundane. Don't worry about making
useful.
money right now. Focus on your recovery. Let's get to a year.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I think was unique that y'all do was the brain scanning part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we talk about it's a gene, it's genetic, and then the other side of it, I'm in this unique scenario where I'm very familiar and comfortable around addicts and addiction because I've grown up around it, seeing it, knowing how it works. But then I also live in a world where there are people who truly think y'all are just lazy or losers or get your crap together. Why can't you stop drinking?
No willpower.
No willpower. What's
Right.
wrong with you? Because, some people are blessed. They don't have it. I'm married to a man who, if I told him today, don't take a drink for the next 5 weeks, he'd be like, okay, and be just fine doing it. But he can go out and have a good time, have a couple drinks like anyone else. But what's missing there, sometimes they forget not everyone has that luxury. And so it is very much a medical issue. And so one of the unique things with their center and part of the plan that he wrote was doing these brain scans where you can actually see a change in people's brains from trauma, but also the addiction. I don't know if you want to speak more to that.
Alcoholic, there aren't many of these left anymore, James, but a pure alcoholic is what they used to be called, where alcohol was their thing. They didn't dabble in other things.
Right.
An alcoholic who drinks every day for years we do a brain scan on them, and this is called a SPECT scan. SPECT is SPECT, which is a technical term, 3 feet long, that at the moment I can't recall what it all stands for. It really doesn't matter, but it's a new technology, relatively new. It's like an MRI. The patient is injected with an isotope, and they can see and take cross images of the brain, horizontally, vertically, all parts of the brain, and develop an image from that. And when an alcoholic has one done, as I just described a moment ago, daily drinker for years, that brain looks like Swiss cheese. It's full of holes and blank spots. And that image is of neurotransmitter and blood flow activity. So there isn't any where those holes are.
Yeah.
It's gone. That's the damage that alcohol and drugs can do. Cocaine and heroin, worse. Marijuana, same as alcohol. Daily marijuana smoker, his brain is impaired.
Yeah.
And so that speaks to why 30-day treatment doesn't work very well. We do a SPECT scan at 30 days. The brain hadn't changed much at all.
Interesting.
At 90 days, it starts to look normal again. So what does that tell you? Blood flow neurotransmitter activity is back, and they're able to make better decisions for themselves.
So it's interesting. You said it took you 3 months.
Yeah.
Yep.
I learned something new today.
Yeah.
Single photon emission computed
There you go.
tomography.
Thank you.
How did you forget?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nuclear imaging test shows how blood flows to tissues and organs.
Yeah. I tell you, if you're interested, Google Dr. Amen and look at his clinics and his SPECT, the use of SPECT scanning
That's
that he
interesting.
does.
I'm going to look into this
He
stuff. I love the brain is fascinating.
It
to me.
is.
And the way that we can trick it,
It is.
like we can even manipulate ourselves as addicts.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's how most get by, right?
Often. Daily.
Yeah.
Oh, this won't hurt anything.
Yeah.
Oh, this is okay. Oh, that's all right.
I'm fine to
Nobody
drive.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Doctor Who?
We had a client. We had
AMEN.
a client come to us from the television program Intervention. You remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Intervention contacted me and said, "We've heard about your facility. We want to use it for some of our individuals that come through our program. Their stories are unique, and we've got one right now who is of Native American heritage, and her mother has severely abused her. Her mother is a drug addict, and she's addicted to speed. She was on the program. She wants help, and we'd like to send her to you." So I said, "Come on." So they brought this woman to us, and first thing we did was send her to get a SPECT scan. And she told us in her admission interview, and we do all the physical work and history workup, she had told us in her history that her mother had a boyfriend that would hit her all the time and hit this woman, our client, in the head so hard one time she was out, she thought, if she remembered it right, for many hours.
Wow.
And that she hadn't been right since. She's cognitively been challenged since then. But no, she said, none of my family would believe me. They're just, you're all right, whatever, you know. So we did the SPECT scan. Sure enough, there's a big blank spot in this part of her brain where she said she had been hit. Dr. Amen addressed that and started treating it with supplements. We did some things nutritionally at the Arbor for her, kept her in treatment 90 days, and it was just one of those godsend deals, you know. Oh, so good. We hated to see her leave.
She went and lived in a sober house after for a little while too, right?
She did.
Yeah,
she lived here.
Yeah,
and
we
then
all.
She ultimately went back to the state of Washington where she was from.
Right.
And honestly, I don't know whatever has become of her since then. This was 10 years ago.
Yeah, we watched the show with her at your house. Yeah.
Yeah, they sent us 2 or 3 clients, but she was the most interesting by far. That case was very fascinating. So that's another one. And then we had another SPEC scan client. He comes in, and the staff described him as just weird. He said, he engages, but he engages inappropriately. He'll show up for everything, but then when he's there, he's inappropriate. And blah, blah. We're having all kinds of issues. So, and one of our counselors had told us something about his childhood that they were concerned about. They said, all right, let's get him a SPEC scan. Let's see what's going on. So we get him the SPEC scan. And when we got the results, it's many pages, and we showed him all the scans. And he saw those, and he was wide-eyed, and he was like, overnight he changed. He became like the leader in the groups, making all the guys get up and get to group, making all the guys, do their assignments, and being their buddies. He was like a sponsor all of a sudden to all of them. He just turned the corner overnight in his own treatment because he saw what he had done to his brain.
He just needed to know.
Yeah. So it works in that way too. It's a great intervention tool for the client, right?
Yeah.
It's a tremendous diagnostic tool for the physicians, our medical director, et cetera. But it can also be used for an intervention.
Well, to your point, James, you mentioned we manipulate ourselves, right? So he had probably convinced himself for a million years, it's fine. One more drink's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. Who knows if he was even there for himself until that moment.
His actions, now that I recall, he was at our last alumni reunion too. He's doing great. But his actions were silly.
Right, like not taking it serious.
He was not taking it seriously. He was compliant. He'd show up for everything.
Was he there on his
silly?
Was he there on his own?
Oh no, no. His family had him there.
Yeah.
Which so is he common. Was resentful at first.
That's
anyway.
Oh sure,
yeah.
And that's pretty common.
Yeah.
Most of our clients they just don't pick up the phone one day. I think I'll try treatment.
Yeah.
Well, and
it's usually a judge, a spouse, family member, sometimes an employer.
Yeah.
We've had several doctors come through that the Texas Medical Association Peer Assistance Program sent us because their license was in jeopardy.
But it is interesting, too, because a lot of times it will be family. And then as you get through the process, you realize also that the family is the biggest enablers. They're the ones that say, I want Bob to get help, but then they aren't doing what they need to do to get Bob help. Right? Like, yes, they maybe got him to treatment, but, they make excuses for Bob, too.
This is so significant. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah.
I was hoping we would get to family.
Yeah.
It is so significant. We have seen, I've been doing this 45 years. The last 5 or 6 years, especially during COVID and since, families, for lack of a better term, are the sickest I've ever seen in my career with what they believe is loving their child versus what is really loving their child. The contrast is significant. So Jamie brought up a great point that not just the enabling, but just not understanding the disease and how to respond to it when it's in the family. It's a family illness. Everybody's affected by it. You've experienced that, I'm sure. I've experienced it. So we have, not to make it a commercial, but the Arbor's family work is second to none. Nobody in the state of Texas.
Plug it all you want.
Well, the state of Texas, nobody's doing family like we're doing. Maybe in the nation. I don't know what's going on anymore at Hazleton with regard to family work, or the Meadows in Arizona, two excellent facilities. But our family work is so significant. The client's family will call us. I have a loved one who needs treatment. We'll set up the process to get that person into treatment, and on that call, the appointment is made for our family program counselor to contact that family and get them started.
Wow.
And we start them every Wednesday night. There's a Zoom meeting with those family members to start the process of educating them as to what's going on. Then 4 to 6 weeks into treatment, they come to the Arbor for 3 days and go through family treatment there. So it's pretty significant, and it continues. The family counselors and program continue to follow those families and help them work through the issues, because they continue when the client's in recovery, of course. But we've seen the craziest stuff where a dad will think it's a good idea to give his 19-year-old daughter a car while she's living in a sober house. When we're trying to teach her structure, independence, self-sufficiency, and that's just one example, and a small one, of the kinds of things that will occur if they don't get the education and work and the family's program is not just education. They're getting their own therapy through the Arbor, so help them understand their reaction to the disease and how it's impacted them and what they can do to get healthy around it.
And whether or not they're helping and facilitating some of the problem, I guess.
Oh, they typically always are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
thank you for bringing that up.
And they typically also have some guilt, right? Like they did this to their kid by or their husband, or by putting them in treatment. And so I think sometimes that guilt steps in, and so they try to do too much, and then it just becomes enabling again too. But I know with our family, we speak to it. It's a family problem. I mean, I had a sibling that ran into a lot of problems as a child or teenager, and it meant I had to miss out on socialite things and events and whatnot because we had to be at family therapy. And that was court ordered, I think. I don't think it was, but what that also
dad ordered
dad ordered. I think, and
Close
I actually
enough.
was going to say this was 1998, so I don't know that most programs had the family treatment, but he did have us all go with other families. So the blessing again, growing up in it, because I think that's one of the reasons you wanted me to be here too. Is for me, therapy is like not a big. It's not a big deal in the sense that it. It's completely normal.
It's not a negative
No,
stigma.
right. There's no negative connotation to it. I think we all need it. No one's too good for it. No one's fixed. You can find it in a therapist. You can find it in your pastor. You can find it in a men's group or a women's group, whatever that is. But I think the power of sharing in general.
Right.
So, you spoke about, I kept quiet. I didn't want anyone to know. And then when that switch flipped, it was like, I need to tell everyone. That's like the greatest gift any of us can give anyone, not only to others who might need it, but for yourself.
Yeah.
And so, maybe that's why I'm an overshare sometimes, because there's been a lot of therapy over the
You
years.
grew up sharing it, which is a good thing.
Right. And we've never, as a family, not talked through things. That's also been the blessing of having him as my dad is I'm often corralling other adults and sitting them down and saying, we're not going to slam a door and hide away from this issue. We're going to address it. And I think, not sweeping things under the rug is a big deal. And these families do that for so long that they hit rock bottom. They turn in, they request a family member go get treatment. And so I think sometimes as part of that guilt of their part in it, they try to do too much, and it becomes enabling, or worse, buying a car for a kid who doesn't need to be, having that kind of freedom just yet, because she's still, working through it. I know I'm very grateful for it all, because plenty of my own friends have gone through it, and I'm glad they're still here on this earth, because some of them are not from this disease, and it's really sad and terrible. So I am grateful not only for him and his program specifically, but I do think most of the people I know that have either done treatment or gone through it, whether they're still sober or not, when I look at their families, there's a lot of enabling there. A lot. And
you mentioned earlier that a lot of families feel guilt about the addict family member, that somehow they've caused or created this problem. And what we see a lot of as a result, that family, you said sweep it under the rug, they see it as a reflection on them,
Right.
and
Shame.
in their circles, they're
Bad
worried
parents or something.
because the stigma still exists.
Yeah.
It's not as significant as it was even 20 years ago. It's better, but it's still out there. And so they don't want their friends or their social circle or their employers or whoever their circle is to know.
Yeah.
So they keep it under wraps. Worst possible thing one can do.
Especially
Absolutely.
imagine that kid coming out of treatment in 6-8 months and, okay, Tommy, we can't talk about it. You know, we're at this wedding. Don't bring up where you were the last 3 or 4 months. Talk about adding this, shield of shame on someone for what? Getting the help they need? And
If they experience quality family work at the whatever center
right.
that Tommy went to,
Yeah.
that usually doesn't happen. They understand at that point, after they've gone through family, that that's not healthy.
Yeah.
But it does take them a while to change their behavior, even when they know, just like us, right? It just takes a while to put everything you learn into practice and see the positive result from it. It takes a while.
It does. And for me, I'm an instant gratification kind of person. When cameras went from film to digital, that was like
A dream come true.
best day of my life. I
Yeah.
don't have to wait a week or even 3 days to get my pictures back. And so when I quit, and there were, like you said, how many times did we quit? 1 million times,
Right.
every Monday, kind of thing. For doing your whole career of addiction, you're quitting all the time.
Yeah.
And I just never. I'm like, well, I'm never going to get better. Nothing's going to change. I don't see any change. I don't feel any different. I don't look any different. I don't act any different.
I so resonate
And
with this,
I
James.
just give up. I'm just going to keep drinking.
Yeah.
Until my expiration date, I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah. I had a year's sobriety, right? I had just a little over a year. I go to the doctor because I can't breathe. His doctor is old, almost ready to retire, ear, nose, and throat guy. He looks up my nose and said, "I've never seen anything like that." I'm like, "Oh my God, yeah."
What is it?
Scared.
You should see my good one.
Yeah. And he said, "We gotta get that out of there and biopsy it right away." He had me in a facility the next day, Bailey Surgical Center, and took a tumor out of my left nostril, way up high up in here. He takes it out. He comes into the recovery where I'm laying there. This is on a Friday, and I said, "Well, what do you think? What was the result?" He said, "Oh, we won't know till we get the biopsy back." And I said, "Well, when is that?" And he said, "It'll be Monday or Tuesday." And I literally said to this physician, "Don't they have a laboratory for alcoholics that's faster than that?"
Yeah. Well, that might have been some of the Twilight drug wearing off on you too.
Well, yeah.
that one.
But
always gets us.
I had
He's
to
like,
sit
"Hey,
with that
Mr.
all
Walker,
weekend.
I found your 8-ball."
Yeah. That's what it was. Yeah.
Sit there all weekend. Wow.
That's the
And not
worst.
drink because you were.
And by Sunday night, I had an experience with turning my life and health over to the care of God that like I had never experienced before. I went into his office on Monday and got the result, and I was ready for whatever he had to say. I really was. Total acceptance.
Yeah.
But it took till Sunday. A lot of praying, a lot of writing, a lot of talking.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt.
It was benign.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're still here.
Yay.
That's good.
Still here. I think about it all the time, thinking back to some of the shenanigans we were up to as kids, and there's no way looking back I could ever live a life where I don't believe in a God, because He saved my life and me from so many terrible, terrible decisions. A lot of them involving alcohol, some of them not, just being a stupid kid. And like that for me has kind of always been the, you just look at it, it's like, if He got me through that, like scot-free, no scratches, nothing, He's going to get us through anything. good, bad, or indifferent. So I know we talk about it, Sean preaches about it a lot. It's like, even if that were a diagnosis that we didn't want to hear, it's like, you're either going to be healed here or healed in heaven.
That's right.
But that's all you got.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for some addicts, that's where they get healed.
Jamie's always had a strong spiritual connection with the Lord. She was in a Christian athletes group in high school. She just always had a very strong faith, and I think that helped all of us, the whole family.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah, I think in 8th grade, I got very involved. 7th and 8th grade. I was saved in 8th grade, and I would say there were days where I tried to, I'd drag my mom out of bed and say, "You're taking me to church, and you're gonna come too." If he was gone or what, I don't even know. His church was always part of his recovery, and that's, again, you have your higher power, so that's okay too. That's your community. But I think, living without a God sounds terrible to me. Without God, without the relationship with God. But beyond that, you can have your relationship with God, but you have to have that next step, which is your purpose. And I think the day that he really realized, this is my purpose, it was probably about the time someone tapped you on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I want to open a treatment center with you." Because it was probably like all your life's work was really finally being noticed and seen and sought out, right? So you realize that you can actually fulfill on the purpose you've always wanted to fulfill on. And once you get those two things, it's like, go do it.
I prayed
I love it.
on that project for 5 years, and I said affirmations every day that it would happen out loud. And it came to pass. It took 5 years.
God's timing.
Yeah.
Well, and absolutely, because not that the guys who you were going to do the other project with are bad guys.
They're great guys.
And not that it wouldn't have been a great facility, but this is exactly where he was supposed to be and who he was supposed to do it with.
Yep.
No doubt.
No question.
So tell me about these alumni reunions.
We have one coming up in November. We do them annually, and we have food and games. We encourage everybody to bring their kids, because we're on 70 acres.
Open to
It's a
anyone who's ever
beautiful
been
spot.
there, of course,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And we have speakers. Sometimes we have a speaker that didn't come through our system, but is a really good speaker. And this year we have a guy that used to work for us who's also in recovery. Didn't go through treatment there, but he worked for us. He's coming to speak. He's a good speaker. And we have 80, 90 people in a tent on the grounds there listening to our speakers, and it's fun. It's fun seeing everybody whose life has changed. We'll get hundreds of people there. A lot of people come in from out of state.
It's their community. It's their family, Yeah.
Give me a success story of somebody who's left that treatment that's now an alumni. What have they gone on to do to better themselves in the world?
Oh, I got stories.
Start with one. Let me see if we need two.
Our
Mine
current
needs
executive director came through our treatment center 9 years ago.
Really?
He became manager of a sober house after he got out of treatment, our sober house. And then he worked in our admissions office, and he had a reputation for being really good at what he does. He got recruited, went out and tried other treatment systems, worked for him for a while, came back to us, director of admissions and business development, and now he's our executive director.
You never know where life's going to lead you.
And it's just, I was sitting in our monthly strategic planning meeting a couple of months ago, and I'm looking around the room. There's like 8 or 9 employees that all came through our system.
I was going to say, he's one of quite a few.
That's really good.
And
So they're paying it forward.
Yeah, again, speaking back to the purpose, right? Like,
You're right.
you may not have, ever known that that was going to be it. But you're literally saving lives every day.
Our first client, number one client that came to the Arbor when we opened, contacts me every September 10th to tell me she's still sober and celebrating, and we have a nice talk. She does, and she calls my business partner, calls him too, and that's the kind of fuzzy stuff you just you don't get selling cars,
Right. And I've sold cars, so I know.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's not always been, rainbows and unicorns either. Like, so when they first started, they had 12 total beds, something like that.
That's right.
Oh, that was actually one of my questions, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they started with just 12 beds, and they were, you open your doors and you got to pay the chef and the nurses and the facility, the executive directors and everything else, whether you have people in there or not.
Yeah.
So I remember when it was like really hard to get 12 or pushing to get 12. And then there's been times where it's like, we have to build a whole new house. We got to, right now we have to build, there used to be a guy's room and a girl's room in the main house. Now they've built how many houses on top of it? So how many beds do you have now?
Well, we have 58 beds now out at the ranch. And what she's referencing is we hadn't been open very long. We realized we needed more beds, more space. And we took a scout cabin that the previous owners of the ranch had built to have their scout meetings. And we added on to it, expanded it, and built a pool in the back and really made it nice. And that became the men's building. And the original house, with some work, we made a lot of changes there too, became the women's building. So the women's building now has 20 beds, and the men's has 22 beds.
Wow.
Then we added the Hope House. I don't know if you've seen
I
that
have not.
yet. And it's on 8 acres, and it was on the corner of our property, and the guy that owned it put it up for sale at the corner of our property, not on our property. And it was a pretty large house, about 35, 40 years old, needed a lot of work, and 8 acres. We bought that, went in and totally rehabbed the house, and now it's, when clients step down from residential treatment to what's called partial hospitalization, that's what insurance drives that. When they go to partial hospitalization, they can move to the Hope House. And we typically, the census is 60-40, and that's pretty much industry-wide. 60% men, 40% women. So the Hope House is used for men. And we generally have guys down, almost always have guys down at the Hope House for overflow from being stepped down to partial hospitalization. And it gives them an opportunity to stay at the ranch and get to that 90 days.
But, they also ran into COVID was a hard time, right?
Well, the county wouldn't let us admit people on 3 different occasions for a week. One time, 2 weeks, they said you can't admit.
And you have to remember, people were sitting at home alone with nothing else to think
But
about.
the liquor store was open.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
That's what, and that was the problem, right?
Strip club was open.
Even your
Church was closed.
Your least depressed people.
That was weird.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Your least depressed, least anxiety, whatever, even those people found themselves in like a dark depression, some during COVID.
Right.
And then that leads to, maybe that opened up the fact that they do have an addiction problem and they didn't know it or whatever else. And then you go to try to get help. Maybe you actually do try to get help and you can't get in.
They wouldn't let us admit.
But they will deliver you
that's a whole nother
margaritas as long as
conversation
you
we
buy
can have.
chips and
Yeah.
queso with it.
Right. Yeah, you can
that's
get your
right.
margarita to go.
Delivered. That's right.
But you can't check into rehab.
Right.
After the first year of COVID, we figured out what we needed to do at our facility to be able to admit people with COVID. And so we established a separate unit, and we started taking them. Next thing you know, we got treatment centers sending us COVID clients with addiction.
Yeah.
Because we were the only
Wow.
ones that had figured out
How to
a way
address
to
it.
do it. Because it was because of our facility. It wasn't that we're smarter than everybody else, although we have a great management staff. But we just had the facilities to be able to finally handle it and save the day. I mean, it really worked out great for us to get us through that. It was tough times. A A lot of treatment centers closed during COVID.
Never to reopen again?
That's right.
Wow. Kind of like restaurants, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you seen an uptick in like fentanyl people coming in for fentanyl addiction?
It's scary
Yeah.
how many we're seeing addicted to fentanyl.
It's
In
cheap.
spite of all the information, everything that's out there.
Are you finding that a lot of them are getting it by accident?
No.
No.
Well, I'm talking about people that are addicted to fentanyl.
They're getting the fentanyl
They're
for
looking,
the
they
fentanyl.
seek it and use it.
It's so dangerous.
It is. It really is.
I wouldn't be alive today if fentanyl had been around.
I think about
in the
that all the
90s.
time.
I'm with you. I'd be.
We say that
I'd
all
be
the time.
in the ground, or my ashes would be in Lake Travis.
We'd be one of the 105,000 people a year who are dying from fentanyl. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
just trusting whoever
Yeah.
gave you whatever
right.
to be exactly what they say it is.
Are there a lot of teenagers coming through your
We
facility?
don't
at all?
treat anybody under 18.
No, okay.
We have, on a rare occasion, our license allows us to take a 17-year-old if they're living self-sufficiently. They're not dependent upon parents or on their own.
Okay.
Then we can take a 17-year-old in that scenario. But
Now, you do help. People have reached out to you about teenagers,
we
and
get
you
'em
get
help.
them where they need to
we
be.
get them.
Sure.
My
They just don't know
admissions department has a resource file. Like, it's incredible. And from day one, our culture that Justin and I demanded, anybody calls, you help them to the point of you seeing them getting the help that they need, regardless if they're appropriate for the Arbor or not.
And a lot of people
So
aren't.
it's a mission in our admissions department to every caller is critical. You got to take care of them, and they do. And I listen to the calls. I have a way to go back and listen to the calls and
Sure.
recordings, and we got the best admission staff I've ever worked with right now.
good.
They're really good. What'd you start to say, honey?
No, I was just going to say a lot of people that reach out aren't a good fit for the Arbor for one reason or another.
Yeah,
But
that's
they
right.
still, I've had a lot of friends' parents that have asked me for his information to get someone help in their family, whether it's my friend or another family member. And I would say 50% of them come back and tell me, it wasn't a great fit for his place, but he got me where I needed to be, or got me in touch with who we needed to be in touch with. And so, again, it just goes back to that purpose. It's not about getting people in the treatment center to make money at all.
Yeah.
Not even a little bit. Yeah. And I've had multiple people leave there and tell me that. We never felt like we were there to make anyone money. We were there to get better.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good. Because there's that was it a Netflix episode or series that came out about the California rehab treatment center that was scamming all the insurance companies? And
Oh, yeah, that guy's in prison.
I figured that was probably. I hadn't finished
He's the same, I believe, the Netflix
Yeah.
show you're talking about, the same guy.
body count or something like that.
Yes. Goes on in Florida, too. Those two states, for whatever weird reason, I think it's their insurance
Laws.
or lack thereof
Right.
regulations. But both those states tend to
They're
have issues
running
with that
people
sort
in
of
and out,
behavior.
and recruiting people for treatment, and then coming
Oh.
back themselves in a month.
Pay them to go to treatment.
Right. Because they make more than what they pay them.
Yeah.
So I hope that doesn't sour everybody's taste
Yeah.
on the industry.
Yeah. Well, it's not
Bad
great.
apples in everybody.
It's not great for our reputation, obviously, but there's a lot of really good treatment centers out there.
What's the best way to support someone with an addiction, and what should you not say?
What should you not say? They need to be approached with the idea that they have a disease rather than they're a moral degenerate. And so shaming them, dictating behavior to them, and those types of approaches backfire. Absolutely won't work.
Especially if there's an underlying mental issue as well, right? Like usually addiction comes along with depression or anxiety or something else as well. So I feel like
About 60%, maybe a little higher than that since COVID, of the clients that come through are depressed, bipolar, and then we have a small percentage of primarily men with schizoaffective disorder. But we can treat all of that, but we treat the addiction first, get them detox, cleaned up, and see what what's really there.
What lingers, yeah.
Because we get doctors at no fault of their own see the behavior and see it as schizophrenia, and it's on their record. So we get a call about somebody that's got schizophrenia and now they're a drug addict. They're using street drugs. And everyone, like the family, will assume, well, it's to treat his schizophrenia or whatever. They come to treatment, and over the first 3 to 5 weeks, they clean up, get all the drugs out of their system. We have a psychiatric nurse practitioner on staff and a psychiatrist and medical director, and they'll work with them. And many times there is no schizophrenia there. They were doing speed.
Drug-induced schizophrenia.
That's right.
Yeah.
It happens.
And then you crash, so you
frequently.
have two different personalities.
But if they do and have a history of it before their drug use and or after they're clean and sober, and we see it, then we can medicate it appropriately. But what was the
speaking to a loved one?
Yeah. I wanted to go
Yeah,
back to
what
that.
not to say.
What
I
not
want to
to
go
say.
back to that. So when I've had loved ones, with addiction, I tell them regularly, I love you and I support you in recovery and health. I cannot support you in your current lifestyle. You're destroying yourself. And I can help you get the help you need and support you in that. I can't support you in what you're doing. So let me know when you're ready for help. That's how I handle it.
Kind of like drawing a line in the sand kind of thing.
They're boundary for sure,
boundary.
but also repeatedly assuring them how much I love them.
It's good.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to what you were talking about with the family before is people think they're loving them via enabling, but that's not really showing love, right? Like even the Bible says, speaking truth in love. That's truth. I love you. You're my friend, kid, sister, brother, whatever. But I'm not going to sit here and assist you in sin, right? Like same thing with sinners as far as that goes. So I'm not going to assist you, not that this is sin, but and I'm not going to assist you in what you're doing in your lifestyle that, that's up to you to make that choice.
Right. Well, it turns out addiction resides in our midbrain, our caveman brain. Flee, fight, and reproduce to clean it up. Those are what the midbrain's about. And scientists were frankly surprised to find that that's where addiction resides when they had the new technology to do the research. People assumed it was frontal cortex, our
Behavior.
CEO of our brain, where we hold our values, where we make our decisions based on those values. And as it turns out, when an addict is using that CEO, if you will, prefrontal cortex, goes dormant. It's not accessible, and the
off.
midbrain's in charge. What's the midbrain want? The next drink, the next drug,
More dopamine.
Yeah. And whatever behavior goes along with that, there are no values to hinder that behavior because you can't access them.
Yep.
That's why alcoholic drug addicts do crazy, stupid crap.
Oh boy, we
When
could go
they're
on
using-
for hours about
That's
that.
a whole
When
episode.
they're using, they just like, what? And you sober up and you go, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah.
Because now you're back in touch with your values. So, anyway, I wanted to talk about the family stuff some more. The support that you give someone who is actively using, if you don't include a boundary with that support, they have no reason to stop.
Yep.
They will not, they can't see it. Their disease won't let them see a reason to stop. Something confrontational, if you will, in the way of an intervention has to get their attention. And it's usually loss of family, a significant legal issue,
Health issue.
destruction of their health, something,
So
And
what,
in fact, James, you haven't asked this, and it occurred to me we ought to cover this. Maybe you can use it. The definition of an alcoholic is someone who drinks and then experiences negative consequences in their health, their family, their vocation, and they continue to drink anyway.
Right.
Now, there's nothing in that definition from the American Medical Association that says anything about frequency, volume,
Right.
quantity, and none of that.
Right.
Drinks anyway after experiencing
And
significant
I
negative
used to justify it
consequences.
by saying I didn't get up in the morning and drink. I would just drink when I got home from work.
Yeah.
But then I would drink for 6 hours after
Yeah.
work.
But even if you drink for 1 hour,
Right.
if it
Or even,
created
3
that, right?
drinks.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a period in my drinking. I was a young man, but it was a period in my drinking where I would not pick up a drink till 5 o'clock, so I wouldn't be an alcoholic.
Oh,
That lasted
Your
about
dad and
a
I
year.
are a lot alike.
That lasted about a year.
must be the.
Then it was like, oh well,
It's 4:45. We're
yeah,
close.
that's close
Well, like
enough.
for me, I'd leave church at noon on Sunday and stop at HEB and get beer on the way home.
Yeah,
Well, it's football Sunday. You
Yeah.
got to drink beer while you're watching.
you wouldn't
I was
qualify
hungover
for your
from the night
diagnosis
before.
if you didn't do stuff like that.
Yeah, right. One of the questions I've always wondered other people's view on, because sometimes I don't even really know what it means or what it looks like for me, but what does fully surrendering your addiction to God mean to you? Fully surrender.
I'm going to repeat myself. No human power could help us with our addiction, whether it be alcohol or other drugs. Doesn't exist. The only solution is to find a higher power and turn your life and your addiction over to the care of that power.
And physically, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for you physically? Like what do you have to do to make sure that you stay fully surrendered?
Oh,
to God?
okay, gotcha.
Like what does that look like?
Yeah, well, for me, it's a program, a daily program, because we only get a daily reprieve, right? One day at a time. So it's a daily program of prayer, meditation, helping others, rigorous honesty, rigorous unselfishness. That's what's required. And it takes practice, because none of us come into this recovery thing with those values.
Right.
Or maybe a few of them,
Right.
but not all of them.
Or you wouldn't
Most
be
of
here.
us, most of that stuff's gone out the window. So it has to be relearned, repracticed, day at a time. And over time, it becomes habitual. You
I
know,
think
for
it's-
me,
Right.
it's like when I've done something inappropriate, I know right away. I don't have to wait till the night to do an inventory. I know right then, and I have to take action to fix it, or do what I can to fix it.
What are you most grateful for in
Oh my
sobriety?
gosh. Certainly my recovery. Certainly finding my God. My family is at the top of the list. I'm so blessed. All 3 of my kids are doing great in life. They're good people. Best people I know. You know, I have a wife who put up with me through all that craziness when I relapsed. When I was traveling for work and the kids were little, she did everything. You know, I would have loved to have been there to help her, but I loved my work. I hated the travel, and I hated the separation it created. But she was awesome. So I'm blessed in so many ways. God showing up for this project, the Arbor, it's incredible. The greatest thing I've ever been involved with vocationally. There's second to none. There's nothing even close. La Hacienda was fun, taught me a lot, but it doesn't compare to this.
I love it. What about you? What are you most grateful for with your dad being a sober
I
sober
think,
living dad?
Yeah, I like I said earlier, being raised in a way where we don't sweep things under the rug. Having 2 parents that have always supported me no matter what the situation was. But loving me in truth. You know, we didn't want for a lot, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't going to sit back and enable me and let me be an idiot either, right?
Right.
You know, I was an idiot sometimes, but he didn't assist in that. How about that?
Only forensically did I discover some of that.
Yeah. That wasn't
You can't really hide
wasn't
much
mine,
from
but
addicts.
I know where you're going with that.
that wasn't mine. We have some funny stories.
Mine.
Mine.
We have some funny stories.
I think we've all said that at least once.
No, truthfully, in this scenario, it wasn't mine. But no, I mean, I was just raised in a way where, you know, it was known no one was perfect, and that was okay. And there are ways to help whatever you have going on. I think, good or bad, I was blessed. I was the youngest, so I saw a lot happen before me with my two older siblings, that it kind of paved a way for me, whether good or bad, where I knew how far I could go without getting in trouble, but still having a good time, if you will. But I also, it just showed me a lot of what I didn't want. You know, I wanted to have a good time in high school and thrive. I actually lived alone my senior year of high school with my 21-year-old brother, which maybe not their best parenting moment, but
Big mistake.
but I mean, was it a big mistake? I lived alone. I was exempt from all my finals. I ended up getting a college scholarship.
What was the reason for that?
So
Finished the same high school.
Yeah, we grew up in South Austin in Circle C.
Okay.
And
So you didn't kick her out.
No. In the prime of the market, they sold our Circle C house and they moved out to what was supposed to be their retirement home at the lake. And that was an hour and a half away, and it was my senior year, and I didn't want to have to switch schools and all that. So they bought a duplex in South Austin for my brother and I to live in. And, you know, I would say 98% of 17-year-old kids probably wouldn't have gotten or done.
She was so unique.
Yeah, I mean,
she was mature really beyond her years. Her mother was the same way.
Well, and I just kind of have like a drive. When I want something, I know I want it. And I knew I wanted to go play college softball, and I knew what it was required to do that. And I would say my husband would probably disagree, but balance has always been something I've been pretty good at, and that I had fun. I lived with my 21-year-old brother. I had friends. We got in trouble-ish, like, you know, minimal.
Right.
Had a good time, but still managed to, you know, graduate, go get that scholarship, go do that stuff, which ultimately made college such a better experience for me too, because some of these kids had never had any freedom. And talk about seeing shame and I hate to say it, I went to a Catholic school, and all these kids were, you know, a lot of these girls went to all girls Catholic schools where shame was the name of the game. And so they show up there with the first ounce of freedom they've ever had. And I mean, I was carrying girls up to their room who I found, you know, their jeans in the boys' bathroom, like bad stuff that luckily, I think, you know, some of that initial terrible mistake making moments happened to me maybe in high school, not that bad, where I didn't have to do that in college. But ultimately, the question was, what am I grateful for? I'm just grateful that our family has always been really open to sharing and to helping other people. I would say for all 5 of us in our nuclear family, like helping other people is kind of our number one, like almost to a fault. You know, we give up a lot of our time and because we love it, right? Like for me right now, I give up a ton of time for softball because I love it. So for other girls to get to play, he gives up a ton of time and energy for this because that's his purpose. My mom is making it her crusade. She's literally right now in South Texas on a political crusade to help register churches. She's going to churches to register people to vote because
Christians don't vote.
Right,
vote.
and gun owners too. What's up with that?
It's so wild.
Gun owners and Christians
it's biblical to get your fanny.
I think
to
they're getting
the
off
polls.
the couch and voting this year.
Well, and so and you know, she was one of the ones that a couple years ago literally went knocking on doors to get 50,000 signatures to remove the public camping ban in Austin. You know, so she, you know, she's out there doing that stuff. My sister is an immigration attorney. We used to joke when she first started. She was, you know, instead of taking payment, taking pastries from the French pastry chef that was her client, you know. So my brother's a realtor. He's out there helping people, all that, you know. So at the end of the day, that's kind of what was ingrained in us.
That's good.
But it was also ingrained that none of us are just right or perfect. We're all going to screw up. We're all going to make mistakes. And instead of shaming each other in that, being there to walk through it with each other. So, you know, when my brother had some stuff going on in high school, like I said, we were all there in family therapy together. It wasn't just sending him to sit on a couch or you know, we were all in it together. You know, my sister had her stuff. Everyone stepped up and have been there now. She's, like you said, almost 27 years clean and sober. So I just think that's kind of, we're not perfect. And from the outside looking in, might look like a hot mess sometimes, but we will always help people.
That's a good picture to paint for people, because you can be a hot mess of a family and still care about your family.
Absolutely.
Enough to want to save them from
killing
themselves,
I have two, like I told you earlier, one of the things I live by is if somebody tells me no, then I'm not asking the right person. The other line that I live by, and in my line of work, I see it a lot, and I excuse my French, but it is every family has their shit. And it's so true. Like I've met people that don't even know some of the crazy going on in their family, and they think they have the perfect family. And then when you start to peel back that onion a little bit, it's like, you're not going to shock me. And everyone living in their own moment thinks that theirs is the worst and it couldn't get worse. And I'm like, oh, hold on. Let me tell you a story. I can one up that if you want. But I mean, it's so true, is like, you know, what you're living in is your reality, and it may not feel like it could ever get worse than that. But I promise you, everyone else is living in that same kind of moment or has had it.
Right.
And every family has it. And there's no perfect family, but you can love each other.
James, these blessings that I've just shared with you and Jamie just really highlighted wonderfully never happens without me being in recovery.
Yeah.
Amen. That's true.
So that's where I get emotional. It's a blessing and it's a gift. Everybody doesn't get it.
Right.
About 10% of the people who want it never get it.
Yeah, I had a high school friend.
Reality.
I had a high school friend, I think probably 3 or 4 years ago now. It was, she wanted it bad and she just never could. And she ended up having a baby, and tried to get clean for a little while. And then, you know, her and the father broke up or whatnot. She moved back here to town, had the support of her family, had her friends around. And, you know, all it took was like one night where she felt like no one was around or answering the phone or whatnot. And in hindsight, probably one of the first fentanyl deaths. Might have actually been an overdose, just she was a heroin addict. And, you know, could have bought as much as she bought the last time she used and thought that was okay. I don't know that they ever finalized an autopsy on that, but was found dead in her car at a gas station with her baby in the back seat, alive. And we're talking head cheerleader, you know, always life of the party, happy-go-lucky, free spirit, great human being, loved people, but couldn't beat it.
Nobody's immune from it.
And, you know, instead of having, her parents were really, they tried. They were probably enabling a lot more than really, I don't think they knew what to do. So that's why questions like the one you ask, what do you say to someone who's an addict, are really important, because I don't think they knew what to do.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact she did have some people in her life who looked at it like it was a moral issue. Like, what's wrong with you? Get your crap together. Why can't you just stop? You're a mom now. Fix it. And it's just not that easy. So I think, you know, having grace is so important across life in general.
Right.
But understanding that, like Dad said, this isn't your frontal brain. This isn't your morals and values. In fact, they turn off and shut down. You physically cannot control yourself.
Yeah.
So having that understanding is huge for those of us who aren't fighting it, because you have to have that grace for those people. And then I'm just really blessed. The second I can't tell you how many random Facebook messages, text messages, phone calls I get from a friend of a friend of a friend who says, "Can I please have your dad's phone number, please?" And he helped save their life. So I would tell everyone, anyone,
Dad's like a Superman.
he's the Godfather.
It's God.
Yeah.
God
Amen.
is-
Well, and that's right. That's important too. Is you
I'm-
are a vessel
God's using
to
you.
do
he
His
just
work.
uses me in that
right.
vein.
That's right.
And I'm grateful he does, because I'm not any good at anything else.
Well,
I don't want to go back to working on computers, so I try to find
There
other
you
things
go.
I'm good at.
yeah,
too.
that's right.
Yeah.
But I would definitely encourage anyone listening or watching or whatever you're doing, like, if, James, you can put my social media attached to this and reach out to me and get you his information, because it's literally I can think of more. I don't have enough fingers and toes for the number of people directly in my life he's helped save. So imagine how far reaching that goes beyond that too, when they start sharing his information with other people as well. So reach
It just
out
takes
if
a
you
spark.
Yep. Reach out
Start
if you
fire.
have, even if you just think you know someone or have a family member who's going through it, like, and then the other side of it is talk to them, ask them, right? Like, tell them you love them. I think that's huge, because I would imagine being in that moment, it's pretty lonely. Like you said, I mean, when you relapsed, it was isolation, loneliness. It's just so easy to convince yourself there's not another choice.
That's the worst thing an alcoholic drug addict can do, is isolate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's actually why I got out of the business for a while. That she talked about earlier, the business slowed down. It did slow down for a while, but I didn't want to travel anymore. And so I sought to do something different for a while. Didn't like it. I tried to do some work.
It wasn't your purpose.
With her mom, and working with her mom was a challenge. I had my way. I've always been in charge. Now she's in charge. She wants me to do it her way. I want to do it my way.
Right.
Well, you're the Godfather, and that's what makes me a saint, because I now work with my mom.
Yeah.
But now
Well,
I'm in charge. It
You're
took a
right.
long time to get there, but
So
and some days she still fights that.
yeah, Jamie knows. Her mom's an amazing creature, absolutely amazing. I don't think I've ever known anything like her. Jamie's the closest thing to being like her than anybody I know.
And she got the best of you
But
and the
she's-
best
Right.
of her.
But she's buffered in some critical areas.
Yeah. Thank you for
Buffered's
that.
a nice way to put it.
Thank you for not sharing the one gene, but sharing all the others.
Yeah. You're welcome.
I think I don't hate, I hate to admit it ish, so don't share this with her, but I am luckily a little more genetically like my mother in that way, where, drive and purpose pushes me more than the gene, thank God. So
Yeah.
I've managed to, there were moments we wondered, but I think I'm good.
You never worried about it? That was actually one of my questions.
What's
too.
funny is and when looking back especially, and it's probably taken me the last decade of really growing it more in my faith and wanting to raise my kids in church and being more aware of my walk with Jesus and all of that I look back and the 3 or 4 years that were probably the most like concerning, more than the genetics, it was I'd turned my back on God. It was the farthest away from God. I mean, I had taken myself to a meeting or two at one point just to like feel it out. And I remember telling myself, okay, well, my higher power is Miranda from Sex and the City, because I'm real dry and cynical like her. And there were a couple of years where I told my mom, I'll save you money on the wedding and save me money on the divorce. I had just gotten really dark and cynical and so far away, from God that was what I turned to instead for a little while. Is the last couple of years of college, especially probably into my first 2 years out of college, and then kind of just re-engaged and remembered, like, without him, remember that time? Like, I mean, I think I just finally started to walk with him again, and then having kids, and again that became really big and important for me, knowing that I wanted to instill that in them from a young age. So, the last decade, especially, really the last since my son was born, I'll have
That's
a
something I
cocktail.
wish I could go back and do
Yeah.
over, is quit a long time ago so that I could be a better example for my kids.
Yeah, and I mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm not
Because they're all grown and gone now.
I'm not perfect, but I can have a drink or two with friends and be done. There are
Yeah.
people in my family who could not do that without it turning into a spectacle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 15 months later, and
Like,
Yeah.
breaking ankles in public and stuff. Like things that just,
Sunday morning, she's dressed and ready to go to church when she was a kid.
yep.
So we go to church. She's first one ready, out the door, in the car, and I'm literally dragging my son by his ankle,
Yeah.
trying to get him in the car. It couldn't be any different. I mean, totally different in that regard. But she was always wanting to be present.
and you were the youngest. You're the youngest.
Yeah.
Well, I always joke I'm the middle child to the business. The business was the baby that I now run. But no, yes, I was the baby of the children.
But like her mom, more mature than probably both her siblings.
Well,
at
you
one
got to see all
time.
the mistakes that they made and not make them.
And
Yeah.
and they were highlighted pretty front and center. So
Yeah.
it definitely helped for sure.
Yeah, and he got so much attention when he was going through his stuff that she felt it. She felt she didn't get the attention that she was used to, and it became obvious at one point.
Well, and
I
for
felt bad about it, but you got a sick kid, you got to deal with it, right?
And for me, I've now worn that as a badge of honor, right? Like I'm super independent. I can do it on my own. I had to learn how to make dinner on my own and do this on my own and do that because I didn't want to bother them because they were dealing with him. And I don't want to be that other kid that's a bother. And it's like, it's taken me again, mostly through Jesus, realizing like being independent's great. It's a great, asset in a lot of ways, but it can't also be a way you push people away and shut down and block things out and not deal with things. So I've dealt with some of that, but that was definitely kind of my badge of honor was like, don't worry, I'll figure it out. Y'all don't have to worry about me. Y'all deal with him, I got it.
Interesting.
Which gets you far in a lot of areas. You can
Self-sufficient.
Yeah, very self-sufficient. I always joke I can build a piece of furniture probably better than my husband. But, we also aren't meant to live this life independently.
Right.
So making sure that doesn't get in the way of relationships and being present and being with people. That's been something I've had to work on the last decade for sure.
Especially addicts, alcoholics, humans in general, but especially addicts, alcoholics. We're herd people. Isolation, as I said earlier, is no way no.
Right. Well, let's wrap it up with one last question. To anybody out there watching this right now who's struggling and wants to put down the bottle or the needle or quit smoking weed, what do you tell them on that day?
I know the loneliness that comes with that. I know how that feels. And I just want to assure anyone out there that's struggling with that they're not alone. There's a lot of us that have been through it. There's a lot of folks going through it right now. There are solutions. Seek the solutions. Seek help. And what's on the other side of help can be beyond anything you'd ever dreamed of. The blessings that come. You're 20 months in, you said,
20
right?
months, yeah.
You're just getting going. You're just getting started. Wait till you see what this life's got for you. It's going to be incredible. It's just amazing. I never dreamed my life could be this good. And it's because I reached out and asked for help. So
And-
it's there.
And you're never too far gone,
That's also very
right?
important.
Like, I mean, we have
no.
seen people.
Good point.
One of my best friends, he was a shadow of who I knew. Two of my best friends, really, both went to the Arbor. Shadows of what I knew. Both of them Division I athletes. Both of them brilliant. One of them was top of his class, graduated from Texas law. I mean, you're talking, and they had found themselves in the darkest, scariest, terrifying places for drugs. And now they went through the Arbor. They're both incredibly successful again. They're working the program. It doesn't mean there won't be battle scars that are there, but they're living life again. So you're never too far gone. Because some of the stories that I was told of where they found themselves are terrifying. And again, that's when I looked at both of them and said, if you can't come to terms with the fact that God got you out of there, and it wasn't you, and it wasn't the crack dealer, and it wasn't the lady down the street who opened the front door, it was God.
Right.
Got you out of there alive and got you here. There's no other answer. But you're never too far gone.
Yeah.
I love it. All right.
Well, thanks, James.
Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
This is fun.
Oh,
That was
I enjoyed it.
That was
I enjoyed it.
almost 2 hours.
Hopefully you can
It
edit it
reminds
into
me-
something good.
It reminds me of how proud and amazing I am of my daughter and how amazing she is.
Oh,
It's not that I forget, but she's so busy I don't get time like this with her
Yeah.
very often. We started going to lunch every other week. That's really helped.
Yeah.